City of Stevens Point Redevelopment Authority meeting, recorded April 3, 2025.
It's 3 p.m. I'll call the Redevelopment Authority of the City of Stevens Point to order for the meeting on April 3rd, 2025. First item on the agenda, roll call.
Chairperson Schleiss.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Gardner.
Aye.
Alderperson Kneebone.
Here.
Commissioner Cooper.
Here.
Commissioner Kemeter.
Here.
Commissioner Laddick.
Here.
Commissioner Barrett.
Here. Number 2, persons who wish to address the board on a specific agenda item other than a public hearing must register the request at this time. Those who wish to address the board during the public hearing are not required to identify themselves until the public hearing is declared open by the chairperson. We do not have a public hearing. Do we have anybody registered to speak?
Should we speak at all today?
No, thanks for listening.
No? Should be good.
Welcome here. Number 3, no one here for pre-public comment. Going on to the regular agenda. Number 1, approval of minutes from the February 25th, 2025 meeting of the Redevelopment Authority.
I move we approve the minutes and place them on file, the minutes of the February
Second by
25th.
Dave. Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 2, discussion of year-end financial numbers, income statements, and balance sheets. Director.
Yeah, so this was requested by the chairperson to be put on this agenda. So worked with the comptroller to put together kind of a summary of the 2024 budget numbers, as well as on page 11, you'll see kind of the total fund balances for all of the RDA funds. So didn't have anything specifically lined up, just this is more informational, and wanted to leave it open for a discussion if you guys had any specific questions or things you guys wanted to know, or things that we can look into and get back to you on. So,
Question. Gene.
On page 10, there's an account for the Forest Cemetery Trust Fund.
Oh, that kind of blends in when they're running the report.
Yeah, but does it, is that a ongoing fund for just?
For just the Forest Cemetery.
Yeah, I mean, the Historical Society is working on to repair the gate on Church Street.
I would suggest to contact the controller, but back when we set that up, when we took over the Forest Cemetery, all the sales and anything that was excess of whatever expenses were going into the trust fund, primarily to fix up the place and headstones and all that. There's a lot of them that need some work. So
okay, I just wondered because they're trying to replace the stone is deteriorating. I don't know if you've noticed it.
no, I haven't.
And they
Wade says I'm not very observant.
But anyway, that they are looking into. They've started a fund drive, or they're starting one. So,
But check with Corey and see what the current regulations are. I've been out of circulation there for a while. If something would have changed. John.
So I understand on page 11, we've got, when we're talking redevelopment authority funds, it's 1.4 million for available funds, and then there's another 500,000 interest funds available for use for the RA for a total of 1.9. So those are the funds that we have available. If we wanted to create loan funds, if we wanted to use the funds for other purposes, that's the money that's available to the redevelopment authority.
yes, the 506 would be the interest above and beyond the principal to be kept intact that we could spend on programs.
Yep. So the 1.9 is the total amount of funds available. We have been drawing from over the past few years, and should the expenses be in line with our last year, Comptroller Laddick did provide an estimate about how many years it would take to exhaust the funds at that pace. Now, that might be a little bit inaccurate because that does not really account for the increase in interest revenue we have from the housing modernization loan, and there are some additional expenses with us creating several loans last year. So that might be adjusted up or down a little bit.
So, but the 1.9, does that include the assets of loans that are outstanding, or is that just actually cash available?
That does not include the loans outstanding.
Okay, so we have that to use to create loans, to acquire properties, to do whatever with. Okay, very good, thank you. That's what I was looking for.
Oh, sure. Any other questions? I know we've been looking at a lot of different programs here, and that's one of the reasons I wanted this put onto the agenda, so we could see exactly what we're talking about, that our funds are not unlimited, but at least to get a better idea where we're situated. Since that's discussion, we really don't need a motion on that. We'll just put them on file. Number 3, approval of the creation of the rental improvement loan program.
So at our last meeting, we fielded several questions and received some recommended changes and modifications to make to the rental improvement program. And as late as today, we also received some additional questions to clarify within the document. So I did provide 4 copies of some additional changes, a recommended final draft of the program. As we had discussed, we did remove the forgivable loan language from the program. We did incorporate the lower interest rate loan for local property owners who are earning 80% or low AMI that we would confirm through tax returns. We did adjust the rent freeze agreement that we discussed. That was one of the tenant access improvements that this body had questioned whether or not that would prohibit a property owner from accessing the program, because it is a long commitment. As one of the tools that we are recommending, we did just discuss with some property owners, and of the 3 that we heard back from in the time we last talked, adjusting that rent freeze agreement to half of the loan length, and the loan terms being a maximum of 10 years, not strictly 10 years. So we would be able to write a loan for 6 years or 7 years and adjust the rent freeze agreement for half of that time. The property owners that we discussed that with were amenable to that change. Some of the clarifications that were requested today, you'll see in red in the copy that I printed off. There should have been 4 of them available, so please share with your table partner. They clarified that the area median income standards change every year. Those change usually on April 1st. We did get those updated numbers. Unfortunately, those numbers trailed downwards this last year, so we will be making that adjustment shortly. Clarifying that the loan to value on a property includes all of the loans that that property owner has on the property. So if they have their original mortgage plus a loan written from us, the maximum they could have is a 1-to-1 ratio on the assessed value of the property. So it's the information that we have on hand. There was some clarification on whether or not the total amount of dollars lent to a particular property owner, whether or not if that property owner was a sole owner or a member of an LLC, if they were a member of or an owner of several LLCs, could they take out several loans? The answer to that is no, regardless of how many LLCs they have and they're technically on. If they are an owner of that LLC, we will only issue them 1 loan. If they are a member of multiple LLCs and that other LLC has different partners, then correct, they are excluded from accessing the program at that point, for now, right? That's what we're proposing for now. There was an additional question about competitiveness of the program. We intend to evaluate applications monthly. If there are multiple rental property owners trying to access this program within its first year, we do want to give a fair shake at those attempting to use the program. So we anticipate evaluating applications every month as long as funds are available within this program. We intend to continue utilizing our loan management software that we also use for our housing modernization loans, so this won't incur any additional administrative costs to us other than staff time, which we expect about 4 to 6 hours to review an application, perform a site visit, have all the title work ordered and reviewed to approve a loan. There were a couple of questions about impact of the program as well. And I think it's of interest for this body, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we would like to see as much impact as possible through any program that we author and are administering. So staff's opinion that if we were to contribute additional funds into this program, or a considerable amount of funds, we could have more impact, as well as if we open this up to properties of more than 4 units, if we remove that ceiling. Now, we're requesting approval of, right now, about $120,000 to kickstart the fund to see how it operates. That would give us arguably enough funds to support renovations for 8 units in town at $15,000 a unit. So if this body would like us to push a little harder with the launch of the program, we could recommend or entertain a discussion of adding additional funds or removing the unit count ceiling.
Questions, comments? John?
I'm torn 2 different ways. On the one hand, I've been talking to people who have been doing remodeling projects on their house, and I've heard numbers of $20,000 as kind of an opening bid. And if we're talking $15,000 per loan, that may not be sufficient to even just remodel a bathroom, let alone do exterior work or anything, windows or insulation or anything like that. So on the one hand, I'm thinking that the $15,000 is not a sufficient number. It probably should be higher. And I'm also thinking that I'd like to see the money be used as opposed to sitting in the bank like we've got here. And so I'm not sure that $120,000 is enough to set aside for this program. I'd like to see the number being elevated. So depending on demand, I'd like to see the money get out and be used for housing rehab, not just a trial for 2 or 3 houses. So on one hand, I'm interested in discussion. Is $15,000 a reasonable number, especially for somebody who's been in the business for a while? And secondly, is $120,000 enough to capitalize the program, or should we be talking more money to set aside for this program for this year and for next year? And the third question I've got is there enough contractors to actually do this work? Are they all booked up already? So I throw those questions out for just general discussion.
Commissioners?
15,000 per unit that'd be pretty bare bones.
I'm thinking that's basically a bathroom, if that. Not electric, not anything. That's
In
just,
my tenure, 30,000 was more reasonable.
yeah, and I'm thinking, which means it should be setting aside more than 120 then to set aside for the program. And I'd like to see the money be used. That's the purpose of the money. It's not to sit here and make interest. That's my take on it.
That's what you got lined up.
We have 2 or 3 duplex owners that would be willing to evaluate the program and apply. We have targeted a few other larger unit buildings in town too that may be more eligible for, say, exterior renovations, siding and windows for a much larger building. It's a 64-unit building, right? If they're looking to re-roof that entire building. Now, I will say it's a building on about a 2.25 acre lot, right? And they use the space really well. Now, that's another potential borrower for that case. We would need additional funds in order to float a loan for renovations on one of those projects, but it could impact a 64-unit structure that has a pretty significant presence in that neighborhood, right? That takes up a full city block. It would be a very visible transformation. So additional funds would absolutely support larger projects, have more of a visible impact, and correct, $15,000 a unit was something that we had recommended based on not just cosmetic improvements, but some of those exterior improvements, right? If we're looking at a 3 or 4 unit building that's sharing walls and a roof, you can extend those dollars a little bit further. And so it's really tailored for a building that's somewhere between 2 and 4 units.
Yeah.
1 unit building probably not going to be the most beneficial
Right.
project.
Dave?
Are we looking to finance the whole project? I mean, or these contractors and landlords have some money in their checking account, or don't they have enough money for a tank of gas?
Wonderful question. So we do include in the scoring rubric and the criteria, we do hope that property owners come forward with matching funds. right? If they score higher, if they have a 1-to-1 match or more. But 1-to-1 match is where we're setting the ceiling for our scoring.
Other questions, comments?
Well, that's what I was going to ask too, is your vision for this, is it supplemental to a financial institution loan? Is it, because that would kind of drive how you want to do this too. The other thing, I wouldn't have a problem getting more money out there, but I think we should maybe concentrate on our smaller local landlords first.
Sure.
Based on someone someone out of Milwaukee that's got a monstrous apartment building here in town, just as an example.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the comment. In our cursory review of properties, whenever our neighborhood improvement coordinator and I are looking for improvements, we're looking at case violations and our local property owners. We first and foremost want to target those folks to use the programs because they are providing a benefit to the community. To clarify further, Mr. Cooper, on your question on how we're envisioning, property owner matching in, that match could come from their personal finances, or it could come from a loan from a bank. Yep.
Other questions, comments? I'm comfortable with raising the amount in there because that's what we've been trying to do for quite a few years, is get the money out and fix up the local homes, so. And I agree, 15,000 won't go very far, and finding a contractor is difficult.
Yeah.
But what's your wishes, Dave?
I'd be comfortable with going to $25,000 per unit. I think we should probably leave the units at maximum of 4 for any one investor. I don't know how you allocate the money from what funds we dip into that. We can do that, or does it have to come back through common council?
No, it does not. This is our funds.
Okay. So
If you make a motion to move forward with the program based on changes, we could entertain that here. And
one more discussion.
Make the motion, I'll second it.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we raise the limit to $25,000 per unit.
I'll second.
I guess, are we still starting with the 120 then, or do we want to up the seed money then? I almost think if we're gonna go with higher, which I'm fully in favor of,
Then we better do 200.
I think we better do.
We could do 200,000.
Yeah, something like that.
Something that the
If we
25
need more, we
goes
can
to.
Gives you 8,
back
right,
to
at
us for
25?
more allocation.
If you went to 200, give you 8 at 25.
That's 8, yeah.
Yep.
I'll second it, too.
Okay.
Yep.
Question for Mr. Cooper. You brought up the issue of matching funds. Is there any benefit, you think, in doing a sliding scale, 15,000 if it's 100% us, and then as the number goes up, there's more match required? I'm just thinking out loud, which is dangerous.
I do a lot of scoring of stuff, loans and grants.
Okay,
That's
yeah.
what I do every day.
Okay.
So there's some value to that if you want to say, well, you're going to take less money and put more here in, maybe we'll score you a little higher. Again, Chris, your vision, if it's a good program and they score decent anyway, let's get that 25,000 out there. That's what I mean. I hate to be too picky on that, but I think there's value to that for if it really takes off, to maybe add scoring, additional scoring in there, or adjust the scoring, whatever you want to call it. But
If there's more demand, you're saying, than
Yeah.
supply.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, let's try it and see.
Yeah.
Test it. Okay.
Other questions, comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second to raise it to 25,000 per unit maximum, and $200,000.
Yep.
Director, take the roll.
Chairperson Slice,
Aye.
Vice Chairperson Gardner,
Aye.
Alderperson Nebone,
Aye.
Commissioner Cooper,
aye.
Commissioner Kemeter,
Aye.
Commissioner Laddick,
Aye.
Commissioner Barrett.
Aye.
Motion carries. Number 4, discussion and possible action on the creation of a commercial revolving loan fund.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, I will take us away. And I have to apologize for missing our first discussion regarding what we titled as a commercial loan fund. Director Kivel, if you wouldn't mind advancing the slide.
Yep, my apology.
You're fine. When staff originally started evaluating this concept, what was first in mind is the recently adopted downtown targeted area master plan with a significant amount of redevelopment opportunity within the district, combined of housing, commercial property, and our existing commercial property that remains vacant that we, as a community, would vastly benefit from those being full. So I did draft a memo in response to the discussion at last meeting to provide more insight into the existing loan tools that our community has access to, including CWED and our Central Wisconsin Economic Development Fund, which I'll refer to as CWED, and CAP services in their programs. CWED and their loan tools, they have three. One of them is a microloan program for startups, and that's only for businesses that are 3 years or younger. Their microloan tool, which is a maximum of $75,000, and their gap financing tool, which is a loan of up to $1 million. They will provide 40%, up to 40% of the project value. They need to have a lender in first position at 50%, and they will need to provide 10% of their equity up front. And there's, of course, collateral requirements with all of these programs, except for the startup loan. That program and the microloan tool have been used rather infrequently until the last year or so. The microloans and startup loans are becoming accessed more, mostly due to the low rates of that startup loan fund. At the last board meeting of the Central Wisconsin Economic Development Fund in March, the board did approve a decrease in the lending rates to 3 to 5%. And so with that recent change, we are seeing additional inquiries for loans between $500,000 and $1.2 million throughout the region, not just the city of Stevens Point. So we are seeing some tangible benefit from lowering the rates and discussing that with our community. We've been pretty adamant about sharing with as many entrepreneurial support centers, our Chamber of Commerce, that this loan is available for our business community to utilize, and we want to continue sharing that out as broadly as we can. With what we were originally intending with a Commercial Revolving Loan Fund for downtown Stevens Point is to accelerate the targeted area master plan and meet some of the gaps that the CWED funding options leave on the table. For example, CWED will not loan to a project that incorporates mixed-use development or housing. We have several historic properties in downtown Stevens Point that have vacant second floors that would benefit from filling either through an apartment or through an office space, but with a demand for housing is one of the options those property owners are really looking towards. They can't leverage those funds, though, for that type of project. If you might recall from last May, the Downtown Targeted Area Master Plan has a lot of variety of projects. Multifamily apartment buildings, some smaller buildings with a mixed-use component, so housing above it, and a couple special projects. Expansion of the Art Center is one of them. Again, debatable whether or not we'd be able to leverage other tools for those sorts of programs. Originally, in our conversations about the Targeted Area Master Plan and some negotiation on development for the Shopko block, there was an expressed interest in supporting more open market rate development as well. And I would love to make sure that understanding is correct with this group. At least my understanding of that point is correct. However, as we see increasing construction costs and increasing costs of labor and supplies for these types of projects, we might not be able to provide development of some of those buildings at a rate that's affordable to our community. And I'm not saying necessarily a low-income project or workforce project, but if we were to even make it attainable for folks at a variety of income levels without setting a low-income requirement on the building, we need to provide some other support. And so the real intent of this program is to accelerate some of the downtown redevelopment, ensure that there is a mixture of housing units and varieties, and support some of the commercial expansions that exist in downtown. We have several business owners right now that are trying to get spaces filled or expand, where the CWED loans aren't going to meet their project needs. So I want to make sure that that background is clear. Now, in our department, our specialty is not in providing commercial loans, and so I've already started taking courses in certification preparation for economic development finance to ensure that we are being thoughtful and complete and holistic in reviewing any commercial loan applications we might receive, but we're also seeking some support from our local commercial lenders or economic development lenders to ensure that we're being thoughtful with every loan applicant that we would receive. We would seek some contracted assistance to make sure we're checking all of our boxes. And with this program, we would expect there to be a loan review committee, and would love to ensure that there is a member of the Redevelopment Authority on that committee to ensure that we have been thoughtful in reviewing any sort of loan application that comes before. It would be me as the designated staff member of reviewing those applications, make sure that I'm not missing anything. John Gardner knows that I'm not perfect, and I will often miss one or two things. So I really appreciate you all for ensuring that we get all of our boxes checked. The rest of that loan review committee would also incorporate a few of our economic development professionals in the area. With our downtown, we expect our downtown manager or director, Chloe Cruiser, to be on that board. Our contracted lending officers for the Central Wisconsin Economic Development Fund would also serve on this committee. A few of the bankers that we have started, or I guess loan officers that we've started conversations with in the community, we would invite to be on that board. And while we're designing this, we are trying to design it specifically for impact to fill our properties and complete some of the implementation of the targeted area master plan. And so we do anticipate needing a rather large fund for us to pull from to support projects in an impactful way. At this point, to support some of the modest property improvements to ensure that we are filling vacancies in second floor units, we expect an average loan to one of those projects to be somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000 for some of those properties. And we would never want to loan more than 50% of our fund out to one borrower, right? We want to protect ourselves from that risk. So our first goal, after discussing with some of the lending officers, if this is of interest to the Redevelopment Authority, is to establish a loan fund of $1 million in 2025. We have some soft commitments and interest from 3 banks right now. Paper City Savings is reviewing the request. And it's not a soft commitment yet. It's just entertaining the discussion. The Prevail Bank has provided a thumbs up and a reference to their grant application portal, and Pineries Bank is also giving us a soft yes as they discuss this with the board. But what we're seeking is a philanthropic contribution first. If there is no philanthropic contribution, we would consider a low rate loan from our financial institutions at a 1% rate for us to relend into specific projects. Now, we would expect this loan to also carry some of the same criteria as the Central Wisconsin Economic Development Fund's gap financing tool, that a local lender needs to be in first position if we're going to be supporting a project. That way, our financing partners in the community are benefiting as well from this. If they're contributing financially to a lower rate loan as a gift to the community, that they are also backing the project to begin with, and we can split apart some of their risk. So I apologize for not being present at our first meeting to present some of that background, but that's the real intent of the program. We're not seeking approval right now, but I wanted to keep you informed that this is a tool we see as being beneficial. Just some early estimates. We did have a developer that's interested in a 20 to 30 unit of residential building in downtown, that they would look for about $2 million of financing to support that project. Using our, I guess, expected guidelines, we would loan a maximum of $1 million to that project. And compared to their interest rate that they would be receiving for the project at 6.5%, if we were to offer up and split their loan up into $1 million from their financial institution and $1 million from this fund, we would save that project cost of about $48,000 a year, which would translate to a savings of $175 a month for a renter in that building. So there's a pretty significant impact in terms of the cost to a tenant of a building. Now, that's a very hypothetical example. That's not on the books. We don't have a project like that lined up. Just an example of how impactful that fund could be for the long term for that project in the building. We have several buildings that would benefit from, I guess, anticipated that would benefit from a project like that. I want to give Chairman Schleiss and Commissioner Gardner also some time. There was maybe a thought that was shared that there might be a way that we could benefit the Central Wisconsin Economic Development Fund and the use of that in the area. I see that. I guess I'll let you explain before I go any further.
Okay. Well, what I was suggesting on this is rather than have us tie up our capital and principal, and especially if we get in second place. I remember quite a few loans that we had over my tenure in the city that we were in second place, and it doesn't matter if you're in second or if you're in 10th place, because the banks aren't going to come over and make sure the city is covered. We're going to lose it. So what my thoughts were is rather than us get in the principal part of it, is that we write down the interest. So in other words, if you got this and if they got whatever the rate is that we would say would be a maximum, we could write down half or more than that, but then our only exposure to that while we're helping in the redevelopment would be that interest cost. And if they paid it off early, well, then we would get some type of a rebate, I would think. But that way, we're not exposed as much, and we still have more of our funds here to do other projects if this community, the rental thing goes off or whatever.
So it is a proposal to discuss also in line with this, but I just want to point out some of the differences that if we were to start discussing this as an option with CWED, it still doesn't support residential projects. We still can't provide any of that support to a residential project, and I don't believe that that's a wind that will change for the Central Wisconsin Economic Development Fund. Those funds had a launch point in history of being designed specifically for business expansion and development projects. Maybe that will change, but I'm not exactly sure. I can't predict that one. My crystal ball isn't that clear. It also just want to ensure that if we are building this specific to the downtown, that we've set some sort of boundaries for a loan like this to help cultivate that targeted area master plan. And I would see this being a resource we could duplicate for other targeted area plans for the city. This would be the first fund that we would start. Perhaps in the future, if there's a targeted area plan that we also wanted to benefit, either the Division Street plan or others that are struggling to gain traction, that we'd look to establish something similar.
Questions, comments? Dave?
Chris, did you look into, the USDA has a program called a Rural Business Development Grant. Did you look into that?
Yes.
Okay, and to be honest, I don't remember the eligibility anymore. Maybe this isn't considered a rural enough area. I don't remember. But it's a good program because you get the grant and then you can lend it out. I know there's other municipalities that have done that around the state.
It is a resource that we had looked into. We had looked into two resources from the USDA: the Intermediary Relending Program and the Rural Business Development Grant. Those do come with restrictions on both of those programs and reporting requirements, so that would be additional staff, administrative costs, and time. We're more than happy to evaluate that. and that is actually what inspired some of this conversation, right? We were looking for funding support to launch a community development fund. So we began discussions with the USDA on the intermediary lending program about 6 months ago to evaluate if it's a tool that we could use. And all of what we've proposed so far within this structure, we could apply for the intermediary lending program. So why I'm anticipating or hoping for a fund of about $1 million in the first year is that allows us to have matching funds in the bank for that intermediary lending program.
Which gets you more, scores you higher.
Correct. And we could net another $500,000 for the fund if we had that available instead.
Good.
Yep.
Other questions, comments?
Just, with the way things are going, is there anybody left in the USDA to even administer
Hey, I'm
grants?
still there today.
Alder Niemann, I appreciate that question. If I could respond
with the
first.
tariffs, I mean, who knows what's going to happen with the cost of anything these days?
In our first conversations with the staff of the USDA, that was one of the first things we wanted to check in with them on.
Sadly.
Is this funding? Are your positions going to remain? Is this still going to remain a tool that we can discuss? And they told us to wait. And then we heard back 2 weeks later to say it's still there, it's still funded at the same level. If you want to access it, we should turn and burn. We should make that application happen. Now, what is also beneficial, how we're structuring with these 3 bullet points and contracting assistance, that if we wanted to submit an application, if we don't have the technical experience in evaluating some of these loans and loan applications, they expect you to have some level of contracted experience with you. We'd have that on the record, which is, checking all the boxes for them, at least.
Are any of these projects eligible for TID funding in an active district?
Technically, yes, and we would expect that some of these larger projects, if it was a redevelopment project, to seek TIF assistance. We just had, this is more of an anecdotal response, but we did meet with a developer or a broker for a development opportunity earlier this week, and they notified us that that the developer would require TID assistance. And in some of the communities that they're working in, even tax increment financing is not enough to move forward with certain projects based on how out-of-line construction costs are right now. So we don't see this as a tool that would replace TIF assistance. If it can, I would recommend that it does. But we see this as being complementary to tax increment financing.
Mr. Chairman, would TIF funds be able to be seed money for a program like this?
We could entertain that as an additional funding source.
I would say looking at the current status of each TIF district, TIF 6 and TIF 10, which are our downtown TIFs, they do receive donations. So they are not self-supporting in themselves. So that is possible. It would come through the donation from another TIF.
Right.
So.
Other questions, comments?
Okay. So what are you looking for now? What are you looking for now?
Right now, I just wanted to keep you all informed that this is where we believe we've been very thoughtful about this as a tool to enhance downtown development, and want to ensure that you're kept up to speed with our progress towards this tool. Now, I appreciate the conversation we've had because it does open a door for another tool for us to support business expansion with the potential buy down of interest for CWED loans. I think that's an additional tool that would be really beneficial for our community. I suppose I didn't want to surprise you all with a big ask one meeting, knowing that we're hoping for $250,000 of financing, and you have had no opportunity to be aware that this is something we're considering as a tool. So I wanted, first and foremost, to get this in front of you as a potential project or program for you all to review and to sit with. If there are major red flags that you would like us to address that you feel that we have missed, would also appreciate your assistance there.
And I do want to emphasize, I guess, before moving on to anything else, but, the public-private partnerships that we're looking to establish here as well with those financial institutions. I know through Chris's discussions already, there have been quite a few that are very intrigued with this idea and really want to be a part of it, whether it's to meet their CRA credits or just to be a active participant in, the redevelopment of our community. So this is something that I think every community strives for, to establish those private-public partnerships and these type of programs. So great, they want to.
Thank you. Really appreciate you bringing up Community Reinvestment Act credits, CRA. Financial institutions do need to meet requirements or obligations to reinvest within their communities. And this is one tool for us to ensure that our financial partners, especially banks in particular, credit unions don't have this requirement, but banks are required to meet these Community Reinvestment Act obligations. And there are several banks that right now they provide lending or grant dollars outside of the community because they need to meet those requirements and they don't have a tool that they can leverage. So this is another way for us to ensure that local dollars are staying local and making sure our community is moving forward.
And is this just going to be limited to downtown to begin with, or are you looking at commercial loans that would cover the entire city to help other areas where it may be needed?
Great question. At this point, this would be entertained specifically for downtown. Right now, downtown is an opportunity zone or a qualified opportunity zone, which there are additional tax credits available to investors if they were to invest in a fund. So this allows us to go to a philanthropist and offer up an investment opportunity for them. When we began this conversation and listing as a commercial revolving loan fund, that was a question that Director Kibble and I had asked each other, is this something that we see restricted to only into downtown? And if one of our primary objectives is to enhance or accelerate the completion of the targeted area plan for downtown, then for the first few applications, we'd really keep it laser focused on downtown, but it could be something that we expand to the rest of the city, and I would really hope that we can. Wausau has done a really good job of starting with a very targeted fund and expanding into other areas. They started on their downtown core and then opened some of their low-interest revolving loan funds to other parts of the city, and now they're seeing investment into other areas as well, which is great.
Any other questions? All righty, keep us updated and as the things go. Next item, discussion and update on downtown targeted area master plan.
All right, I am super excited for this one. Last time you all had seen some of these graphics was last May with a wide variety of comments from the public. Why are we looking at this specific parcel for a park? Why are we looking at this? Is this really feasible? And so staff have been moving forward with coordination of this plan. We still remain hyper-focused on the Shopko block for redevelopment, given that it is a very large swath of land. So our focus is there. We are still negotiating one potential development, specifically residential, for that parcel. We do anticipate having a development agreement before this body in the next few months. They are hoping for a construction start of August of this year. So wanted to make sure you're all aware that that's still being negotiated. Jared and I have been meeting with our Public Works Department, our Utilities Department, and our transit has been incorporated through public utilities. We are proceeding with the design of the right-of-way, so the Strongs Union connection, the College Court connection, and if you go back one more, this is a little too far ahead for me. Sorry, I'll make you wait just a little while longer. Planning and design of the right-of-way and a couple of those elements, stormwater management for the whole site this year, and with construction beginning as early as next year. Transit is going through their own needs analysis and design process for the transit center itself, but we do anticipate providing some direction and guide for them. We will schedule a public design charrette for the right-of-way and some of the public spaces, including the park, early this summer or late in spring. As our initial kickoff, we'll go through a design process and come back for another information session or charrette to showcase what input they provided and what it would look like. So we will send invitations to everybody to ensure that if you want to participate in some of that, or if you want to observe, more than welcome to attend. We have not had any announcement from the EPA and no indication whether or not the EPA will not be proceeding with the awards for the brownfield cleanup program. Given that it is a program designed specifically for real estate redevelopment, we don't really expect it to be touched, but cross your fingers, cross your toes. But based on some of our, I guess, evaluation and work over the past few months, we did reach out to Vanderwall to update some of the graphics for the downtown target area master plan to address some of the concerns of the transit center and whether or not it would be what sort of design would be most appropriate for our community, as well as some additional information on underground utilities. There was one additional graphic that was not included in the plan as adopted that illustrates more of the concept for the riverfront that I wanted before this body to get a few eyes on, because we do believe that it would be really necessary for us to have that image adopted when we're discussing potential investment partnerships with the community to make this plan come to fruition. So now, if you want to move to the next slide. Originally, what was presented for the, I guess all we're seeking today is a recommendation that the council approve an amendment to the downtown targeted area master plan for 3 images. What's on the screen right now is the targeted area master plan Shopko conceptual redesign as it was adopted. Indicates a couple of residential buildings on the north half of the parcels, the transit center, which could have multiple uses, a small park, mixed-use development along Main Street, and one purely residential building on Church Street. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. What you're going to see before you is evaluation of our certified survey map for the Shopko block. This includes the Union Strongs right-of-way, the previous building parcel, and the parking lot parcel. Director, I'm going to have you move your cursor over the utility easement that's underneath the parking lot, the southwest corner of the parking lot. Where Director Kivala's cursor is, there is a utility easement that runs most of the way from Main Street all the way into the proposed Church Street, or College Court extension. There's still utilities in place there. We do have some water and sewer lines still available. And so instead of us going through as a community and incurring the additional costs of removing and relocating utilities and redesigning those systems, we will find it more financially prudent to leave those utility systems in place and to adjust the plan, because we still believe we can ensure that all of the elements of the plan are satisfied and result in an attractive plan for downtown Stevens Point in this block. Director, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, unless anyone has any questions about the problem that we had run into. So what's on the screen is probably the most simple redevelopment or redesign of that plan. It still incorporates all of the elements in potentially more appropriate design of the transfer center for the buses, and an expansion of the park space to oversee, I guess, overlap the rest of those utility easements. That way we're not interfering with them long term. If we need to get into access and maintain them, that we can. And instead of the mixed-use transit facility, we replaced that with a mixed-use building to take full advantage, if possible, of the expanded park space. So in that building in particular, we would be prefer a restaurant or other type of entertainment style business to utilize that public space to ensure or help that park be lively, add additional eyes on the space with the additional customers there. Don't believe I have any other input on this image, but if you want to stop for questions now on this set of images, there's an additional photo of what the concept plan would look like as it was realized. Director, if you want to move to the next slide.
The couple of thoughts about this. One is that you've got the transfer station moved further away from Main Street, and we've got it here now, basically right on Main Street. Is there an advantage to moving it away? Obviously, there's more space, but could that function still be here, so it's closer to Main Street, so there's more of a tie-in between the area of activity and the transfer area?
I had the same concern when I saw that, you know. I thought the transit center should be more visible to Main Street, especially for visitors. And a while back, when Director Konowski was here, asked the guy that owns the building next to the transit center if he'd sell it, and was yes. So that's still a possibility. Or you could acquire that building and tear it down.
The other question I had, is there restrooms in the transit that is being proposed now?
There would be planned to be restrooms in the transit center.
There would be, and our transportation superintendent, as they go through the needs analysis and design work that they'll have contracted, it should be included.
Yeah, I think to answer your question, Commissioner Gardner, you know, the moving back, the intent would be when we redo the streetscape of Strongs Avenue, which is the north-south here, the intent would be to make that a very inviting and almost pathway to lead you to the transit center. So it would still be very visible from Main Street. It would not be up against Main Street. Which would alleviate buses turning in and out from Main Street specifically. We felt as though trying to push that more to Center Street and keeping that on College Avenue, which is the center road coming through here. Sorry, they're not labeled. But allowing that bus traffic to be more centralized, a little bit away from the heavy foot traffic of Main Street was felt to be a little bit safer. Again, could be 100% debated, so it's not a super strong stance.
Other questions, comments? Gene?
Where is the public parking? You know, our concern has always been that parking on Main Street, and a lot of it is used by the bank, well, the two banks, and the law firm. But those people were promised decades ago, when they built up, that public parking would be provided to them.
Sure.
So they would stay in the downtown area.
Very good question. So we are, you know, negotiating a few other projects throughout the community that concern is being raised. As it relates to downtown parking with this parcel in particular, in the right-of-way designs that our Public Works staff are putting together first before our first public charrette, one of the concepts that they are mocking up is a maximum amount of street parking available design plan. So they will look at all of the public right-of-way and evaluate what is the maximum number of parking units parking stalls we can fit into the streetway, or like the right-of-way and streets on Main Street, Church Street, College Court, and that re-extension, the parking behind the buildings, the Strongs and Union connection as well, and we are in negotiations with the developer that is proposing a project for the what would be the AB site in the new plan or new concept. ensuring that they maximize the number of parking stalls that they have available. They will be performing a traffic impact analysis and our parking study, parking study, not traffic impact analysis, I'll be very clear, on the number of stalls they expect to be necessary for the residents for their project. Now, they're proceeding with a design before the EPA award is announced that if we are awarded that EPA grant, that may allow us to support additional underground parking at the south half of the block as well. So we could reallocate funds, and we're very hopeful for an award from the EPA. If we don't, we still have the parking to serve the residents and employees behind it. We really are really hoping for those EPA dollars to come in for underground parking. Director Kivela and I have been evaluating some other additional opportunities for above ground parking structures throughout the downtown. We're strategizing what our maybe financial request from a developer might be to contribute towards a downtown parking structure if we need to.
I don't know if you've seen, well, some of the recent news coming out of the state and various state communities, but to try to avoid parking structures because they last a very short time, and I know they're expensive as hell, and to have that short time availability and expense to the taxpayer is hardly,
That's why it's our last choice in a lot of this. We're trying to fit as much as we can through the right-of-way design.
And does is the north side of the development with where buildings A and B are located, is that ground feasible for underground parking?
Yeah, so they are evaluating with their engineering team how the building will need to be positioned for underground parking at that site. We have about 10 and a half feet to groundwater, so the building would need to be elevated a few feet, I believe. They haven't confirmed. That's the initial stance. The groundwater depth is lower at the south end of the site, so there is more capacity to handle underground parking on the southern half of the parking lot.
Yeah, I'll point out to Chris's comment about the right-of-way design. So as an example, along Main Street, if you look to the southern portion here of the visual on Main Street, when redesigning this lot, changing the current parallel parking into angled parking would over double the amount of parking space available, there. I guess currently there is no parallel parking spots there at the moment. So I guess if that were to be parallel and counting on the other side, that where it is available, you'd be more than doubling the amount of stalls. Also looking to carry through that design as you go on the Strongs Union connection, so having the angled parking, which would, again, significantly increase the number of stalls available. So the small metrics like that, or small things like that we're looking at to evaluate the on-street would be first. And then to reiterate Chris's point, parking structures would be our last resort. As we evaluate, we have a big old map that we're taking and trying to figure out all the parking needs for every development. And we feel we will be set for some time. You may not get a parking spot directly in front and out the front door of your business, but it would be within a reasonable block or two walking distance.
Nobody wants to park more than a block away, I can tell you, especially in winter.
It's fair. It's fair.
Yeah, we're trying our best to ensure that.
And why do we
Isn't an
need,
underground parking a parking structure? And if it's doesn't last a long time.
It is fortunate enough with the construction of underground parking. It does align quite well with the foundation and footings that they have to do anyways. So it does come with some added, the continued maintenance costs, but the cost up front would be significantly less because you're already incorporating what you would have had to put in for footings in the building anyways. So there is some overlap. I'm not saying it's cost, super cost effective still, but it is more cost effective than an above ground parking structure.
I have a question. Why are we dependent on an EPA grant fund for underground parking? How's that tied in?
Well, it's not that we're dependent on it, but it is exceptionally helpful.
Okay.
Disposing of contaminated soil is very expensive.
Yep.
Yep.
And so otherwise.
So if we're going to go for underground parking,
we
we're going to need to incur a pretty significant cost.
Okay.
Now, if we didn't have that EPA financing available, we could look at other funding sources locally, but I would prefer to not put that on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we don't get the EPA grant, we don't have to disturb it then? Is that what you're saying?
What's that?
If we don't get the EPA grant, we don't have to disturb that contaminated soil, it can stay in place?
Right. We had sought the EPA financing to support the redevelopment of this block, which would be to address the contaminated soil primarily. So if there was a development proposal that did not disturb the soil and they had a remediation plan for that site,
Okay.
they wouldn't need to do underground parking for that site, no.
At that point, it would just come back to the conversation of, would we like to push for underground parking to ensure that there are no parking issues? And that would be for this body to decide at that point.
And we're going to do angle parking on the street that runs north and south on the east side of the development too? The one up here?
Yeah, either angled or parallel, but there's opportunity for angled parking on Church Street. I believe that's the street you're asking.
Yeah, we'll put together the visual for maximum parking. We want to bring that forward to the public because it would eliminate a lot of green space. So if that would be acceptable to the public by this body, everyone else, I guess, that is the route we would go. But of course, there's different options, so we want to make sure we have that conversation. And it's hard to picture just talking about it, so why we've asked our Department of Public Works to create a more of a visual to bring forward.
Okay.
Other questions, comments?
Right. On to our last image. So the riverfront redevelopment plan I included in the presentation was the bubble concept that points out the uses that would be saved for this site. Residential, it's a mixed-use opportunity, a redevelopment opportunity that's pretty unique on what is now known as the Chase Bank site. Unfortunately, this image doesn't really do us a whole lot of justice in communicating with the community what this will look like. What Van de Waal had included but was not incorporated into the adopted plan. Director, if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide, is this image. There was, if you've been around long enough, you may recall that the redevelopment plan included a much longer opening of Moses Creek. There was some investigation done to see how financially feasible that would be. Unfortunately, it's not quite as feasible as we would like it to be a really unique feature to the downtown. So that was removed, but for the most part, this image has been around since 2019, but it was not included in the adopted plan. Can't really exactly say why it was excluded, but we want to ensure that for our sake, if we are going to be communicating with community partners and potential funders of work in our city, that we have this available. This is an image that we've kept on file in when developers have asked what the vision is for downtown Stevens Point, had asked for a very striking visual. And we get the best response from potential developers when they can actually see what it is that's going to be happening. And this isn't just for these sites in particular. We're talking about sites across the city. Negotiation for, and I wouldn't call it a negotiation, in background discussion for a different parcel across the river. Folks wanted to know what the vision is for the rest of the downtown. Having this image certainly gets them excited and a little more motivated to be working with folks to execute projects. All of the uses were outlined on the previous bubble concept slide, but there are potentials. I will reiterate that this is a conceptual plan. There are a couple of elements that we want to ensure are incorporated, expansion of the Arts Center being one of the primary objectives of this, enhancing the public space along the riverfront, and then providing some other uses that will continue to enhance that public use of the space. So potential restaurant space. Again, a lot of this is listed as potential. We want to be flexible with this as we want to address community needs. In either case, we're hoping that this can come back to this body for discussion and recommendation of approval into the Common Council, and would entertain discussion and questions on what's on the screen.
I think it's been brought up in prior years, but the development of the apartment buildings take up all the, or most, a good deal of the parking for the park. It's where the public parks to get to the park, to get to the events, especially at Riverfront. And where is the parking coming from? Because the park is expanding areas of the grounds into event space. And
I think that is a really great point in which, we continue to evaluate all of the parking in the downtown area. That will be top of mind. It very well is possible, as these are just potentials, that is reserved for continued parking on the park. Chris, I don't know if you have anything else to add, but again, reiterating the potential, that is a great point. Mm-hmm. That is something that we would, as we have this visual, because without it would be very difficult to discuss, but as we have this visual, we can see that, hey, yeah, that is an element that needs to be continued to be discussed, and that's something that's maybe missing from this visual, so how do we accommodate that?
I would go so far as it would be to go beyond just discussing this at this point. We should certainly move forward with evaluating the number of stalls that will be lost with this vision and how we're going to reallocate that, because, correct, this is our feature park for the community. A lot of large-scale events take place here. Now, there are nearby parking lots that can continue to support the use of the space that we might not have control over, that we might need to discuss, such as the Mid-State Technical College parking lot as a major source of parking for downtown events. It does get some use for downtown events already, but it is a great point. It is one of the major concerns, too, that some of the banks have commented on when evaluating or getting a glimpse of this target area plan is how are we going to ensure that's going to happen. So that's another challenge that's being returned to us too from other members of the public. We will not forget it. We will have to evaluate it.
because the street parking from the north to the north side is up to almost, beyond 4th Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Almost to Buchalt, you know. So,
John?
and some of those streets they've been widened in recent years, but some of them are still pretty narrow to get through.
Very fair.
I would question the soil conditions that would, if they're adequate to allow those residential developments that are being, those 4 units that are being proposed there. And the other side of it is they really do visually cut off the park from the main streets, from the downtown. There's a element of blockage there that you're isolating the park from the rest of the downtown rather than joining the two. So I don't know if the soils are contaminated enough that you can't have residential anyway. And then maybe parking becomes some of the use there where it is now. And then there's also the element of blocking off the riverfront from the rest of from the street.
Fair points. I will comment on the environmental conditions a little bit. So we do know that this is the Wisconsin Public Service Superfund site. We do have about $680,000 from the Superfund program to help address some of the environmental contamination on the site. We have very strong partners in the community to evaluate the environmental conditions on the site and evaluate and prepare a proper environmental plan or remediation plan to ensure that there is safe development here. We agree, don't want to move forward with a plan that would put members of the public at risk.
In that regard, if you see old maps before 1900 of the city, when the slough still existed, Moses Creek, back into Prentice Street area, you can see that it was depicted at least wider because there were a number of mills, sawmills on the slough going into the city. So up to 2nd Street and beyond.
Yep, usually, so in this case, when we perform an analysis, it'll be summarized in our Phase 1 environmental site assessment, and Phase 2 will really get into the meat and potatoes of how dirty the soil really is.
Yeah.
So we'll be sure that once we have some movement from Wisconsin Public Service on the condition of the site, that we will share that information.
One thing with the public service and the contamination, about 20 years ago or so, I had discussions with them, and they said as long as we don't disturb the soil underneath, they would remain responsible for cleaning. If we disturb that soil underneath, it's our baby now. And we did have somebody look many, many years ago about putting up a office building in that there, but they'd have to just put down a pad without disturbing the ground underneath. Now, things may have changed with public service and different people there now, but that's what's, I know we have in a file someplace.
Well, we will certainly reference those files. Typically, when building on a site like that, if they do not disturb the soil, they still are the developer of the project, not necessarily the city. The developer of that project would be responsible for evaluating. In this case, probably would be vapor testing and mitigation at that building on site. But that wouldn't be the responsibility of the city or the Redevelopment Authority. That would be the responsibility of the developer. That has been a recent discussion with, say, the Northside Yard Departments as they continue to monitor the environmental condition at their site.
All righty, anything else with the downtown plan? This is part of that, I presume. All righty, then we'll move right along. Approval.
So I would, if this body is, needs some additional time to evaluate or to consider the sketches, I would request a motion to recommend approval to Common Council, unless this body isn't prepared to do that today.
What are your thoughts?
We would,
It's an approval of the new concept, how it's
Laid out.
recommend approval to replace the Shopko conceptual plan images and include this image in the downtown targeted area master plan.
So moved.
We have a motion.
Second?
Any second? Jim? Okay. We have a motion and a second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to add to the motion, a friendly amendment, if you want to just add it, that we express concerns about parking, and we'll look at the projects on a case-by-case basis. They won't necessarily end up looking exactly like the map here because of our concern about parking availability. Secondly, I'd like to have the staff look long and hard about moving that transit center closer to Main Street and replacing private development where the transit center here is proposed here in this plan. I think you could actually get more tax revenue if we put something private there where this transit center is proposed, and you'd have the tighter connection between the transit center and Main Street. So those two amendments on this one, and then also the one on, maybe I should stop there. What is the motion?
Wasn't that kind of the plan with that original transit center, was to condo out like the second, third floors, whatever? I don't remember.
It was. It looks like they've dropped that now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
Right.
think if there's income to be made there, I think that's a viable
Well, I was thinking if they moved it off closer to Main Street, then the site here that's now in blue could become a private development as an alternative use. That's that. And then the one on the riverfront, again, I'm going to reiterate what Mr. Kimbener said, which is the issue of a case-by-case review and looking at parking availability, as opposed to just adopting this whole cloth.
I'll second that amendment.
If you're willing to put that on.
I'm fine with it, because we're basically, that's what instructing staff to look at these other things,
Yeah.
right? That's what we're saying, so I'm good with that.
Okay,
That's fine
so that's
with
the
me.
main motion then.
You good with that, too? Okay.
Read back what the motion is.
Motion is to approve motion is to recommend approval of the transition of the two Shopko visuals, first and foremost. The addition of this visual, but also for staff to consider as a part of this visual and the other visual, parking.
Case-by-case review.
Case-by-case
parking.
review. And there was one more.
And moving the transit center closer to Main Street and
Yep.
replacing the transit center here with private development.
That pretty much cover it?
Got it.
I do have a clarifying question, I guess. So, in your thoughts, I guess just while we're on the topic, in moving the transit center closer to Main Street, do you have any, we won't hold them to you, but any suggestions on how to do that? Would you say, like, incorporating it into the or the mixed use, or
I
would you
have
say
a real
keeping it
concern
separate?
about that, because I think you're going to wind up with an empty building up there, because who in the heck wants to go and work and everything else with all that dang fumes coming up into your building every day?
No,
Which
that's-
could give us some,
That's not what I was proposing. What I was suggesting is it would be essentially where it is now. And if they have to acquire the building next to it to widen out the space, then leave it where it is. But essentially the same proposal they've got there that's proposed in blue in this particular proposal. Just slide that down to
Okay,
where it
because
is, where the current one is on Main Street now. Strong's extended.
somebody
Yeah.
that was coming up in the conversation about putting it.
No, I wasn't talking about,
Multiple.
no.
John,
that's-
when they revitalized the square up in Wausau, did they put a transit center into that someplace?
It's
Yes.
about a block or two away from the square.
It might be a good idea to have a conversation with them, see how that's working out. Right?
That's a good point.
Talk with Wausau?
Good point, yeah.
Instead of reinventing the wheel, right? I mean,
Yeah,
if it,
yeah. It's about 2 blocks away.
okay.
Yeah, from the
And this would be about,
Just down the block from the theater.
East, yeah.
Good point.
I don't think I've ever saw it.
Really?
It's kind of hidden if you take that one way around by the courthouse.
Okay.
It's kind of sandwiched in between the courthouse and where the one-way comes back through the downtown to head west.
Usually if you go to a show, you park in the bank's parking lot.
Yep.
It probably was built when the mall was still functional, and then maybe it had some sort of relationship then.
Maybe,
When it was,
yeah.
and now the mall's gone, and so it's kind of sitting by itself now. But then again, now they're going to replace the mall with something, so I'm not sure what the plan is.
And it's positioned really well for courthouse access as well.
Okay.
In that county building, so there might have been some, but speculating,
Yeah.
we can ask.
So, a good point.
All righty, any other clarifications? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, I will stop interrupting you. Thank you.
Number 6, approval of request for proposals for Shopko parking lot.
All right, this is my last agenda item to speak on today. So with the targeted area plan being revised to provide an updated visual for the Shopko parking lot, I believe we have a fairly good understanding of what the vision is, at least for that space. So as long as we're not moving the transit center into that block, I think we can start to proceed with marketing the property to a developer or potential developers, plural, since there are multiple buildings on the site that we may be able to construct. So included in the agenda packet is a general request for proposals. We do anticipate, in past experience, there had been requests for proposals issued by former directors recently that had set deadlines. The common feedback that we'd receive from developers is that if they see a deadline, they're going to ignore it. first and foremost. I just want to make sure that this body is aware of that. Because of the time constraints of RFPs and the amount of work that's available for construction, RFPs, if there's a timeline, it's usually enough to disincentivize them from considering the opportunity, since they figure somebody else will get their application in and they probably will miss it. They got other projects they've got to worry about. So what we're finding to be a pretty common practice in other communities with set development plans is to publish an RFP and let it sit available and update it from time to time as the community adapts, if at all, between the announcement and when a developer is selected, and then to sign a letter of intent with a developer that may match the intention of the redevelopment plan, so that way they have some security to spend the finances to develop their concept, since there are pretty significant architectural fees and developer fees that will need to be incurred to put together a plan strong enough to really be approved by a body. So we do have a draft of a rolling request for proposals included in the agenda packet. Includes all of your core concepts or elements from a traditional RFP, just removes the deadline. And Director Kivela would also request an approval of some finances to be spent on marketing for the site, which would include a fairly large for sale sign on the site, so we know loud and clear that the site is available. Included in the presentation are images of two possibilities for a for sale sign. One produced by yours truly and the other produced by Director Kivela. The best, we'll let you all guess who did what.
So would that be coming out of our pot of gold or the city's pot of gold, depending on how you're going to, because we have control of two different pieces here?
Yep. Well, Director, if you wouldn't mind touching base on the cost of the sign creation.
Yeah. So what we would be looking at is having a sign printed. It would be similar to like the H-frame signs you see out in yards, except they wouldn't cut it. It would be the full 4x8 sheet. It would have one of these visuals on there. That cost would be about $185 to produce, and they said it would last anywhere from 3 to 6 years. Minimal fading. Minimal fading to start. Obviously, as you get to 6 years, there'll be some fading. Also would work with our Department of Public Works to create the signage stands, which would come in relatively cheap as well, around $200, $250 for the materials. They wouldn't charge us for the labor. So all in, you'd be looking at about $450 for that sign. The sign would be reusable, the sign stand, so we would not have to pay for that again. But obviously, the sign itself would have to be reprinted depending on which lot this gets set on. So there would be an intent to also do this for Lot 8 to get the visual out there as well. Trying to draw more interest. I do know there is a sign there already, pretty basic, just a phone number, doesn't draw much interest. I know to one of your comments, kind of want to make it pop, draw people in, get people excited. So that sign there currently doesn't do that. So eventually we'll come forward with the same request if this is favorable. But we would be looking about $450. I could also talk with this, I guess our department or other property funds about maybe the city covers the stands, and then RDA would just cover its signage itself.
That sounds good. My biggest concern was how much are you asking? Because you came up and said, we got to do this, this, and this. And if you're doing RFPs with going out and doing whatever, that could get expensive. So if you're talking under $1,000,
we would be talking under $1,000.
I don't have a problem. Does anybody have a problem? No? Okay. Go ahead.
We just transferred the money to the city. Not with the land, I mean. We transferred the land to the city. The city owns it.
Well, we get it back.
Well, not yet.
Not yet. We have control over it. We have control.
Use it to your advantage. Yeah, so we would be up to, I would say, up to $1,000 to spend on the marketing. We anticipate it being half of that, but.
Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
I'll make a motion.
Gene? Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Update on the sale of property, 1,700 Strongs.
Yeah, last time we were here, brought forward that we are looking to close on the property 1,700 Strongs. At that meeting, it was motioned to move forward with that, however, work in the most amenable way with the next-door neighbor to solve the sewer problem. So staff wanted to bring up kind of where we are at with that. So after last meeting, we reached out to that neighbor, set a meeting with both, with his side. It was him and his father-in-law specifically. Set a meeting with them to run through everything, kind of current situation, where the current pipe is. Met our utilities director out there. They marked the line, notified them that the existing main does already have a lateral extending off of it that comes to their property line. So showed them where that was, kind of went through the different options. So they do have two options to extend the sewer pipe. They can come in off that existing main and just go straight in.
Off Brawley Street we're talking about?
Off Brawley Street, yep. So the manhole is actually right dead center in front of their doorway if you walk straight out. So it's a perfect location, but that lateral does extend to their property line. So they do have the opportunity to run that straight into their house, almost near where their gas and water are coming in. And then they would have to do some replumbing in the basement to make that work. Otherwise, we did work with the buyers of 1,700 Strongs and the neighbor to have an easement granted alongside, within 1,700 Strongs, alongside the Brawley Street property for, I think it was 10 feet. That would allow them plenty of access and room to extend a lateral out where their current lateral is. So they can loop it. There's different options, I guess is what I'm saying. So we met with them several times, made sure that they were amenable to the situation, let them know that we are here to assist in any possible way. I believe all parties left very satisfied. The closing went through. We don't anticipate it having any issues. After the closing occurred and the easement was recorded, we did make the connection between the buyer and the current neighbor so that they can cooperate in utilizing a plumber for their work. So both developments would need a new sewer lateral, so save the mobilization fees and use the same plumber. So both were amenable to that as well and interested and open to using whoever the other party would like to use. So I just wanted to bring you that update that we did work with them as much as we possibly could without, I guess, paying for it outright or digging it ourselves. So I believe all parties are satisfied. We have not heard otherwise. The situation is not dead, although it seems to be resolved. They still need to do the work, so could be hearing from us again. But fingers crossed.
Construction this year, you think?
Yep, they do hope to start construction this year. They were working on some preliminary plans as we are working through the sale process. So,
Other questions of the director? No action is needed. We are adjourned. Thank you for coming this afternoon.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.